American Pickers appeared to be a dream career on film. In dusty barns, two friends are negotiating bargains, laughing together and searching for hidden treasures. However, Mike Wolfe kept quiet about a very different story for years behind those road trips and smiles. He's at last opening up now. Long shooting days and difficult negotiations aren't the only things involved. It's about the 5 individuals who made it nearly impossible to work on the show. People who made his favorite things heavy. This isn't rumors. The man who created the brand and endured the drama is telling the truth. Who then drove Mike over the edge and enabled him to finally speak up after all this time? 1. Fritz Frank. What is more painful than a business failing? It comes with the breakup of a friendship. Mike Wolfe gave that heartache a name, Frank Fritz. They served as American Pickers faces for more than 10 years. Frank and Mike. Searching for American history, 2 men in a rusty white van drive through abandoned towns and back roads while searching barns, dilapidated garages, and dusty attics. Although they discovered neon signs, old motorcycles, and oil cans, the true gem was always the banter, inner jokes. The strange vibe that gave you the impression that you were simply riding along with 2 old friends while they chased tails. However, something was going wrong behind the scenes. It wasn't abrupt. On camera, it didn't blow up. It was more subdued and in some respects more depressing than that. Mike and Frank had been dating for years, since the late 1980s, in fact before they were featured on television, before the History Channel offered them a chance. These 2 Iowan men were united by their passion for motorcycles, antiques, and the excitement of hunting. History like that doesn't come easily. That kind of kinship takes time to develop, which made it even more difficult to watch what transpired next. Frank disappeared from the show at the beginning of 2020. No farewell, not a word, simply gone. Fans noticed right away. Was it something to do with health? A respite? A disagreement over a contract? There weren't many responses to the queries. It made sense at first. For years Frank had been living with the agonizing ailment known as Crohn's disease. He was concentrating on his recuperation after undergoing extensive back surgery at that time. Later on he revealed that he had stopped drinking, lost more than 60 pounds, and was making an effort to look after himself. He expressed his desire to return. He was prepared. Then there was stillness. Frank finally spoke up in 2021, and what he said hurt. He stated in an interview, "I haven't spoken to Mike in 2 years. After my operation he didn't even give me a call. That's the way things are. No messages, no trips, no check-ins." That quiet seemed like a betrayal to someone you used to call a brother. The fans were blown away. Did Mike ignore him? Was Frank being challenging? No one was truly aware of what transpired behind closed doors. However, we were aware that the show continued. Additionally, fresh faces appeared when Frank left. Mike introduced new pickers such as Jersey John to the audience. And gradually it became evident. Frank wasn't taking a vacation. He had been discreetly ejected. Mike was largely silent. No interviews. Not a drama. Only courteous but ambiguous remarks. And that quiet, it just served to chill everything. Then everything changed in July 2022. Frank had a severe stroke. All of a sudden, the anxiety seemed irrelevant. Mike broke the ice by posting a note expressing his continued concern for Frank and his prayers for him. Fans briefly believed that this tragedy would help them reconcile. However, it never did. Frank Fritz went away in early 2024. The door to their friendship abruptly and permanently closed. Not only did Mike experience a profound loss, but millions of viewers also felt as though they had lost a friend. Frank wasn't ostentatious. He had no intention of becoming famous. He was genuine. The type of guy who would become genuinely enthusiastic about a dusty old gas pump when he walked into a messy shed. He made cheesy jokes. When things became excessively costly, he complained. At a yard sale, he haggled like your dad. People loved him because of that. Mike eventually revealed more after Frank's passing, and the grief in his voice was audible. He claimed that he had always dreamed they would get together once more, discuss the situation, perhaps have a drink and reminisce about the past. However, that day never arrived. There would be no American Pickers without Frank Fritz, Mike replied. Furthermore, that wasn't a PR line. Grief was that. That was sincerity. It wasn't explosive when they fell out. Lawsuits and yelling matches did not occur. That was louder than that. Just two longtime pals growing apart. Additionally, it was already too late when one of them decided to fix it. 2. Wolfe Robbie. However, neither a network executive nor a competitor betrayed them next. Someone seated at the family table said it. Mike should have had the support of Robbie Wolfe, his own younger brother. Now you most likely witnessed it in real time if you followed the later seasons of American Pickers. Following Frank's abrupt absence, Robbie took center stage. When Mike brought in his younger brother to assist keep things afloat, it initially appeared to be a traditional family move. It was promising. Together the two Wolfe brothers set out to continue the family tradition and search for treasure. In principle, it sounds like gold. However, in reality, it was not long before the Fishers appeared. Robbie's vibe was different right away. Robbie added a sharper edge to Frank's laid-back, humorous and sincere interest in people's tales. He seemed more concerned with flipping merchandise than with respecting the past, and he was noisy and combative. According to several spectators, it was like witnessing a used car salesman who happened to stroll into the wrong set. Some weren't too courteous. Fan reactions quickly grew on Reddit. One post that gained a lot of attention was, "On fast forward, Robbie acts like he's running a pawn shop. Just hustle, no heart." People remembered that line. It perfectly captured what the audience thought had changed. Not just with Robbie but with the performance as a whole. Then there were the particular times. Even when elder collectors were uncertain or emotionally invested in the item, Robbie lowballed them in certain situations, as fans pointed out. One especially upsetting footage featured a woman who was reluctant to give up her grandfather's antique clock. She was obviously conflicted. To her it held significance. Nevertheless, Robbie simply grinned, leaned closer, and closed the transaction. There was a terrible aftertaste from that time. Because the purpose of American Pickers was to preserve stories, memories, and dignity, not to put pressure on anyone. And suddenly, it appeared as though those values were eroding. It wasn't just fans who were concerned. There were rumors that the show was more planned and choreographed in certain instances. Sellers are being prompted by producers. They're making deals. They are fabricating emotions. The previous genuineness which captured the essence of Mike and Frank's road adventures and won people over began to fade. Indeed, the distinction between performance and reality has always been hazy on reality TV. However, it seemed like the scale tilted too far when Robbie was involved. To be honest, there was no official confirmation of any of this. However, when numerous fan communities begin to voice the same grievances on forums and social media that the show lost its soul the moment Robbie entered, well, that kind of smoke generally spells fire. However, Mike's silence was what truly fueled the fire. He didn't stand up for Robbie. However, he also didn't confront him. Not in public. Not even in a subtle way. And that quiet says it all for a lot of devoted admirers. Mike appeared to be prioritizing the brand over the friendship. Or worse, putting blood before all else, including the people who had supported him for more than 10 years. It was best expressed in one post that went viral. Mike used to feel like one of us. He now merely feels in charge of a show that he hardly believes in. The difficult part comes next. Everyone aspires to think that family never splits, that bringing your brother in demonstrates trust and loyalty. However, what took place here? The exact reverse was true. Robbie wasn't keeping the tradition alive. Can you fathom that he was profiting from it? The program shifted from a moving exploration of lost tales to what some viewers referred to as vintage flipping with a corporate filter. Fast, cold, and too polished. Furthermore, the harm extended beyond the audience relationship. Behind the scenes, it was painful as well. According to several insiders, the atmosphere on set became more heated and crew morale declined. Stress increases when laughter decreases. More posturing, less picking. What's the irony? After Frank, Robbie was meant to be the patch. The person who kept everything together. He divided the fan base instead. He changed the voice. Additionally, he came to represent everything that American Pickers once opposed. It was more than just the material. The soul behind the product was the focus. What about Mike? It placed him in a position that was almost impossible. Frank, the center of the performance, and his best buddy had already passed away. It was a risk to bring in Robbie. However, Mike didn't protest when that risk began to cost him honesty, connection, and trust. Perhaps he was unable to. He might not have known how. Or perhaps, like many of us, he simply hoped that everything will resolve itself before matters worsened. However, it didn't. It only became more difficult. Because here's the thing, what does it say about who is truly in charge? If you can't stop your own brother from altering the show's DNA, and if you allow quiet to overpower action. It was seen by the fans. They sensed it. They then began to check out. Now consider this, would you permit your brother to transform your life's work into something that is hardly recognizable? Because that's precisely what happened to Mike Wolfe. He lost more than just a buddy or co-host. He gave his younger brother the wheel, and the entire show took a wrong turn somewhere along the road. Unfortunately for Mike, that wasn't the last betrayal. For the sake of the ones that follow, their origins were not familial. They were the people who operated the performance from behind the curtain, the suits above. 3. The creators. We've previously discussed the unpleasant fallout with Robbie and the heartbreak with Frank. Just wait until you hear what was happening behind the scenes if you thought family drama was awful. Because Mike Wolfe didn't have to deal with his co-stars or relatives next. The producers were them. The people who made the decisions. The true strength of American Pickers. To put it simply, they were adept at stirring things up. American Pickers was designed from the ground up to feel authentic. Like two ordinary guys simply traveling the country by car, searching for treasure in abandoned barns, conversing with collectors, and reviving items that have been forgotten. The entire purpose was that unscripted energy. In a 2012 interview with ScriptMag, Mike Wolfe even stated it himself. This program isn't about celebs or staged battles, it concerns actual people with authentic tales. And in the past, it was accurate. Mostly anyway. However, things began to change as the show gained popularity and the need to maintain high ratings mounted. More than anyone knew, the producers started quietly reshaping the show behind the scenes. This is when things start to get interesting. Many of the trades we saw on TV were actually pre-negotiated long before Mike or Frank appeared, as several former sellers and Reddit insiders have noted. After the price was agreed upon, the cameras would start rolling, and the hosts would act out the entire event as if it had happened on the spur of the moment. Look, it's not against the law. TV is that. Faking the drama, however, alters the entire vibe when your business is based on genuine picks and bargaining. On Reddit, one admirer commented, "It was like watching a play. The shine was gone, yet they were behaving as though it were happening right then. It no longer felt sincere." Another major problem, conflict that was manufactured. Producers began to lean on conflict as the seasons progressed, not only between buyers and sellers, but also between Mike and his own staff. In a behind-the-scenes conversation, a former crew member even alluded to the fact that some sequences were staged to foster heat amongst cast members, even in the absence of any real tension. And consider this, Frank's gradual departure from the program. Mike might not have thought about that. The Collider article claims that choices about the production were frequently made far above the heads of the actors. Frank did have health problems, to be fair, but many people think the producers took advantage of that to make things more interesting and draw more attention. Views are equal to drama. The twist is that Mike Wolfe remained largely silent during this entire ordeal. He publicly defended the show when people began to accuse it of being phony. He insisted that the emotion was always genuine, the pics were genuine, and the objects were genuine. Perhaps it was for him as well. Mike has consistently